Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Married Now Widowed. We're your hosts. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Nadine, and this podcast is about navigating life after loss through unfiltered conversations.
Welcome back, guys.
Welcome back.
Another episode. This episode is one that we have been meaning to do for a long time, but have just been caught up in different topics. So I thought we'd get this one done. It's all about parenting through grief. So I'm going to ask you the tough questions. Some of them are from our listeners and some of them are just questions that I've come up with. A lot of things that we sort of touched on in previous episodes that I said like, oh, we'd go in and do like a big episode on that. So let's get right into it.
Okay.
Now, I thought we'd do your take on this because your kids were a lot older when Mick passed away, whereas my son was just, you know, 7 months old. So it's a little bit different. So first of all, how old were the kids?
So my eldest was 10 and my youngest was 7.
Okay, 10 and 7. So they're at that age where they know exactly what's going on. Do you know what they knew about death prior to Mick dying?
They knew about death, or my eldest did. My youngest, and I didn't realise this till after he died, she would say odd things. Like we would go to the cemetery. And before we would go, she'd say things like, can't we take his phone? Can't we take some clothes? And then, you know, I'd tell her like he's, you know, he's not with us anymore. But then when we'd get there, we'd sit at his grave and she'd say things, sorry guys, I'm a little bit sick. She'd say things like, why can't we just pull him out so he can sit with us? I don't think she understood exactly what death was, you know? But obviously, you know, she gets it now obviously.
Had they been to a funeral before?
No.
Okay.
I don't think they'd been to a funeral before, but when I went to funerals, I would tell them. Like so-and-so passed away, I have to go to a funeral.
Anyone close to them in the family?
No.
Okay, so they've never really experienced it before. So their first time experiencing death was with their own father.
From memory, yes. That's correct. Yep.
And all right, let's go. I know in one of the really early on episodes, we sort of touched on how you told them and what it was like. But I know in that episode we said that we were going to dive deeper into it. It's just taken us a while. So let's go into that. How did you tell them? What was their initial reactions, etc.?
So prior to him passing away, he was obviously quite sick. You know, when he first got diagnosed, he didn't want the kids to know that he had cancer.
Right. Did they know what cancer was?
Speaking to them now, my eldest knew.
Okay.
But even, I think for me at the time, if they knew what cancer was, normally when people think about cancer, they associate cancer with death.
Of course.
And so I know that we both just wanted to protect them. We didn't want them to worry. We didn't want them to, you know, stress out or we just wanted to protect them. So we didn't tell them that he had cancer. We just said that he was sick and that, you know, he was going through treatment to get better.
Right.
So there were obviously times, you know how it is during chemo, where like he's knocked out, he's on the couch for a week, can't really do anything. He really wasn't working, to be fair. So when he was quite ill, they knew that, you know, he was ill, he was on the couch. But I don't know, like looking back now, they didn't really show any emotion. They were just living their normal life. And to be fair, he didn't he didn't want them to stress out. But I also think that when he was going through certain things, he tried to hide it from them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when he was laying on the couch, he'd grab one of them and he'd just snuggle or watch a movie.
Still try and be silly or whatever.
Exactly. And still try and be present.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just looking back, I remember that they were just doing
normal.
their thing. They were just doing their thing. They knew he was sick. But then when he went into hospital, we said to them that he needs to have an operation.
Yeah.
And, this operation is obviously going to help him. Obviously, we didn't know that he was going to be in hospital for 4 months.
Yeah.
But they were coming to visit him either every day or every second day. Yeah. They stayed with my mum or my mother-in-law. My cousin lived with me at the time. Mm-hmm. So, someone in the family would bring them after school and they'd spend the evening with him. And then we went into lockdown and every time, so he came out of hospital twice during that 4-month period. Every time he'd come out, he wouldn't last a couple of days and then he'd go back in.
Okay.
So we went into lockdown. Nobody could go and see him. I think I've explained this in a previous episode. I then got an exemption. Mm-hmm. So I think they had called me one morning and asked me if I was going into the hospital. It was a Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, of course. And they said, okay, well, we're meeting in his room at 11 o'clock. Professor wants to come and speak to you guys. So I was there at 10. They came in. He came in with his whole team. And that day, they just literally said to us, like, there's nothing else that we can do. The cancer's returned. They gave us several options, go home, go to a hospital closer to you or stay here. I will look after you. Anyway, we obviously went through all of that and I've spoken about that in a previous episode, but then the social worker came in to me.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm organising a day for the kids tomorrow with their father. We're going to do a whole heap of activities together. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, that's nice. And then she said, are you going to tell them? Mm-hmm. And I remember just thinking, like, how do you tell your children that their dad is going to die? Mm.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Like, how do you tell your kids dad's going to die?
Yeah.
And then I said to her, I can't. And she said, no, you need to tell them. And then she got me this book. Mm. And this book, it's a children's book, but it explains death.
Right, okay.
And she said, just read this to them tonight.
Yeah.
And then bring them in with you tomorrow morning and we are going to organise a whole day where we'll do things with the kids and with their father.
Right.
And I was like, okay. So I went home and I just couldn't.
How can you?
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
Did you look through the book?
I did.
What was it like? It's probably hard to remember, but roughly like.
It's just a way of like explaining what death is to children.
Right.
Right? Like.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't remember. Yeah. And I probably didn't read the entire book because I was...
Yeah.
I just found out that he was going to die.
Yeah.
They had given us a prognosis of a couple of days to a couple of weeks. I'm like, well, how the fuck do you want me to read them this?
Yeah,
like,
of course. Yeah.
How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
Anyway, and so I remember I just said to them, sleep next to me tonight. So they slept in my bed and I couldn't
Yeah.
I couldn't bring myself to do it. I had just said to them that tomorrow we're going to go to the hospital and you guys are going to do like painting with Dad and you're going to do some fun activities with Dad.
Yeah.
And they were like really excited.
Yeah, of course.
And then I got a call that night or early next morning. It was probably like 4 o'clock in the morning. And it was a doctor and he said, we don't think he's going to make it. We need you to come to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. And that was the morning that they were supposed to have the day, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. I said, can I tell like our family? And they said, no, at this stage, just you and your kids. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. So I woke them up and I said, I need you guys to get ready. We need to go and see Dad. He's not feeling the best. Now, all along, I didn't want to associate, like I didn't want them to think that if you go into hospital, you're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't want them to associate the hospital with death.
Yeah.
Because if, you know, God forbid something ever happened to them and I needed to take them to the hospital, or I didn't want them to think that, okay, if you go to the hospital.
Trauma, if you had to go to the hospital for something, they'd be traumatized.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they got up. They didn't ask me any questions. They got ready. We got in the car and we were driving down to the hospital. And I'll never forget where I was. I was on the M7 turning onto the M5. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know, sometimes people get sick. They go to hospital and they get better. Sometimes people get sick. They go to the hospital and unfortunately they don't get better. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't say anything else. Like I couldn't say it. Like I was trying to say something, but
that's all that came out. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know what to say to them.
Yeah.
Like, again, how do you tell these two kids that your dad's going to die?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. Adults can't process it. Imagine children.
Yeah, like I even remember, you know, calling when we first found out that he didn't have long to live, like just calling our family members or our closest friends and telling them I struggled.
Yeah.
Imagine
of course.
The kids.
Yeah, your own children. Absolutely.
Anyway, so...
Did they say anything after you said that?
No. No. They're probably thinking like, okay, what else? Well, like what's next?
Yeah.
But I couldn't say anything else. We get to the hospital and he was in a lot of pain. And so all the nurses were in there. There was a doctor in there and I didn't want them to see him like that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, one of the nurses came to me and she said to me, there's a room just next door. Let's just get them to wait in the room until we settle him down. So they went into this room and then like they were on their iPads, whatever. Yeah. And then I went in. I went back into him and they had given him morphine, but then they had given him, I can't remember what it was called, but it was another drug just to kind of relax him. Mm-hmm. And so he got a little bit better. Mm-hmm. They fell asleep. Mm-hmm. So waited a little bit. They woke up. They came in. They spent some time with him. But he was in a lot of pain.
Right.
So, and I don't know if I made the right decision. I don't think I've even said this to you. I sent them home. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's what you thought was best at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They spent a couple of hours with him.
Yeah.
But then I sent them home.
Mm.
My mum came and picked them up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they couldn't do that whole day with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the last time they saw him.
Right. Well, I think in that moment, that's probably the best thing to do to protect your children, right?
I thought it was the best thing to do.
Yeah, of course. And really, there's nothing to say that it wasn't the best thing to do. I mean, hindsight is, but maybe seeing their dad die would have traumatized them more.
Yeah.
Like they're young kids.
Yeah.
Really, at that age, at that stage, they were so young. So I don't think that you didn't do the right thing. I think most people would do the same. I don't think anyone wants children in that environment, even if it's their own parent.
I think I just didn't want them to see him in that state. Of
course, yeah. Yeah.
Of
course.
He was hallucinating. He was saying the most ridiculous things.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He was in so much pain.
He probably wouldn't have wanted them to see him like that either.
I don't think he would have.
He did make the right decision.
I don't think he would have.
No, definitely not. And you know how men are. They don't want anyone to see them weak or, whatever, especially like their children, their wives, people that they care about like that. So I think you did do the right thing.
Yeah. And you know how they are when they're going through chemo and all of that, they look different.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
And so there was already such significant changes.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just think that would have really traumatized them. Of
course, yeah.
When it came to the funeral though, I gave them the option.
Oh, okay. So hold on. So they went home with your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And
with my mum.
She came,
she picked them up.
And then Mick passed away soon after.
So that was the Thursday.
Yeah.
The Thursday morning, they told me that was it. He was going to die.
Yeah.
So they came. They spent a couple of hours with him. I've got photos of him hugging them and them hugging him and kissing him and whatever.
Yeah.
They left, and then Thursday night, I slept there that night.
Mm-hmm.
He died Friday night.
Friday night?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, right. Yeah. Okay.
But most of Friday, just unconscious.
Yeah. And so they had gone home. They were with your mum. You were still at the hospital. When he passed away, how did you tell them that?
So my mum dropped them off to my cousin. My cousin was living with me at the time.
Right.
So he passed away midnight, whatever it was. Yeah. I think I got home maybe about 4:00. Mm-hmm. I had the cousin that was staying with me, and then one of my other cousins was also there.
Mm-hmm.
So I got home, and then they opened the door, and obviously the kids were asleep.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what I said, what I did. I remember I had a shower and I jumped in bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I waited for 7:00 to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got up. I went downstairs. One of them woke up first.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her to wake the other one up.
Mm-hmm.
So then they both came down. They sat in front of me. And I said the same thing. Sometimes you get sick. You go to the hospital and you get better.
Mm.
Sometimes you get sick. You go to the hospital and you don't get better.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just said, Dad died. Yeah. They cried, screamed, hugged each other.
Mm.
And then we just had a whole heap of family like come over and be around us and support us.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if there's like, how do you tell them? Like, I don't know. There's no wrong way to tell them.
I mean, you can't really. I don't think there's an easy way to tell them.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of it. Yeah. What else do you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so full on. I just feel like that's such a difficult thing to have to tell kids of that age. Like, that is just.
Especially like. He was just everything to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had the best relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like now when I ask them, I actually asked them this last week.
Yeah.
They want to come on the podcast.
I love them.
I'm like, what do you want to come on for? I don't know. Ask us questions.
I love them. They're the best.
And then I just asked them, I said, like, what did you know at the time? Like, what did you know, like, what did you think he was going to die?
Yeah.
Celine said there were times where she thought about it.
Yeah.
But she would try and snap out of it.
Yeah.
Her words.
Yeah.
She's like, I'd try and just think positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Liana said she knew he had cancer.
Yeah.
Because she overheard us talking.
I love her.
Like, of course you did.
Yeah. 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 Right.
But she said that she also thought that he was going to get better. She said it crossed my mind that he would die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, like, when you see your parent going through that for, 9 months, you're going to think, why isn't my parent getting better? Like, why isn't my dad?
Yeah.
Why is he not getting better?
For sure. But I can imagine, like, because, even as adults, you think about it, but you don't really think they're going to die. You know what I mean? Like, you do think, they might, it's a possibility, but you're never really, so imagine a child.
Yeah.
Like, if we're like that, imagine a child.
That's right.
So.
And you just never think you would go through that or that it would happen to you.
Yeah. You never think it's going to happen to you.
Oh, you've got more questions
I have.
for me.
I do. I know. That was a lot. But another question from a viewer, which you've actually answered, was that, like, looking back, do you think you handled it the right way? And I know there was some doubt, but I feel like overall.
No, I think not telling them and me protecting them and this also came from him. I think us protecting them, I think I handled it the right way. The only thing I ever questioned was just that Thursday.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I questioned.
Yeah.
Like, did I make the right decision in sending them home?
Yeah.
That's the only thing I questioned. In terms of how we both dealt with it.
Yeah.
And, they were his wishes. I don't want them to know that I have cancer. I don't want to freak them out.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I don't think I change anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know
it's not like they are at the ages that they're at now. Like my eldest is turning 15 would be a little bit different.
Every age 10 would be different.
7,
yeah, that's
you
right.
know?
And I know we've already discussed this a little bit. But for people that don't know, did they choose to attend the funeral?
My eldest did.
Okay.
My youngest didn't want to.
So she said, I don't want to go. Right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
She said she didn't want to go.
And how was your eldest at the funeral? You probably don't remember the funeral.
Somewhat. My cousin had her kids go.
Okay.
They weren't really present when they were burying him.
Okay.
They were to the, I don't know if you know the old cemetery. There's like that mosque there as you're driving in on the left-hand side.
Where Mick's buried now, you
yeah,
mean?
but before, there's like a mosque.
Yeah.
They were there.
Oh, okay.
And then when they buried him,
yeah,
she came over to me and we went to his grave.
Okay.
Yeah, but she wasn't like there when they were actually burying him.
Oh, okay.
She was sitting with my cousin's kids.
Okay. Yeah.
And they brought them to sit with her.
Of course, yeah.
It was like, how traumatizing for a 10-year-old to see her father being buried.
Of course.
Like, it's different going to the grave. Like, it's still hard, of course.
Yeah, but it's different. Yeah.
Just seeing that.
Yeah, very full on. And
we can't handle it.
As well, like some people might not know because, you know, everyone comes from different cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, etc. But for us, we don't have coffins, so they're in a white cloth and their face is exposed. So for a kid, I think that's a lot. I mean, that is a lot for a child. I mean, a coffin is still terrible and hard.
Of course.
But
yeah,
to see,
I couldn't.
I think that's couldn't do that. Yeah, I don't.
She was very upset.
I'm sure most kids are not in that part for that. Yeah,
no.
Yeah, it's a lot.
No,
it's very traumatizing.
Because I thought about, I'm like, how am I going to do this?
Yeah,
but you know what? My cousin's husband actually took control of that situation,
that's good.
Which, like.
That's
really
good, of course.
really appreciated because he was just like, no, like let's just put them here and they're fine.
You need that though, right?
Because you're not thinking.
No, of course
you're not
not.
thinking.
And you're too emotional. And
that's right.
Yeah, you need someone that's to take control.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, another question that we have. This is from a viewer also. How do you keep Mick's memory alive with the kids now?
I love that question because it's a good question.
Yeah.
I'll never not keep his memory alive with the kids.
Yeah.
You know, we constantly talk about him.
Yeah.
Go to the cemetery, we visit him.
Yeah.
Everything we do, and I think I've also spoken about this in a previous episode, we involve him.
Yeah.
Whether it's our own birthdays, we go to the cemetery to visit him.
Yeah.
Not just, his birthday or Father's Day or our own birthdays always involves the first thing we do.
Yeah.
Go to the cemetery.
Yeah.
And I constantly speak about him.
Yeah.
Constantly speak about him. Honestly, I don't know if because April is his like birthday.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's this whole month, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people have sent me messages going, oh, we've been thinking about Mick a lot the last couple of days. His niece, our friends. And it just made me think we've been doing that a lot. We've been speaking about him a lot this past month.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like every couple of days we're like talking about it. Just this morning in the car we were talking about him.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as well, because one of the ladies that wrote in sort of said something on the basis of like, I want to keep talking about him, but I also don't want to like make it too traumatic for the kids. But I think what people have to understand as well, that it's not necessarily like, I know when I talk to Hader, it's not about the death, the cancer, the sickness.
No, you talk about the happy stuff.
Yeah, or just random stuff. Like if I go to a place that his dad would always go to, I'll say, oh, your dad used to shop there all the time.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So it's not, there's nothing morbid. There's nothing sad about it. It's just normal things that you would normally bring up and normally say.
I wouldn't be talking about, that whole
too much
experience.
Yeah.
Because that can you know,
yeah,
I think it will affect them.
Yeah.
I did speak about it with them last week just because they wanted to come on the podcast, and I did ask them what did you think back then?
Yeah.
But generally, when we speak about him, it's things like that. Or like a song will come on. I'll be like, oh my God, your dad used to love this song.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
Or like, you know, I'll give you an example. So last week I was driving to work and a rock hit my windscreen.
You didn't tell me that.
Oh, didn't I?
No.
Oh, that was the whole thing.
But not the windscreen.
No. That was the whole thing. I was like, call insurance right now.
Oh my God.
Because they were in the car with me.
Yeah.
And I ended up calling insurance and I was like, oh, thank God. Like we sorted it, right? Yeah. And then that microsecond, I was like, I need to call him.
Yeah.
And then I told them.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what just happened to me?
Yeah.
And they were like, what? And I was like, for a split second there, I was like, give me my phone. I need to call your dad.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, Mom. And I'm like, honestly.
Yeah.
Just like for that split second.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, Mom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. But it's no longer sobbing and like, you know, it's more like, you know, I don't want to say like they're happy, but
no, but like,
you know, you're thinking about
a little laugh and
you know,
stuff that and you know, I think as well, like, because you know your kids were not super young, but still young, and there's a lot of things that you can still teach them about Mick, you know, 100%. That they still wouldn't know, like, you know, whether it was like, I don't know, like, oh, when me and your dad were like first married, we used to do that, you know, stuff like that 100%. You can always teach your children about,
exactly.
You know, so I don't think it has to, it's not necessarily, like, I know the question that lady was asking, but it's not necessarily like a traumatic time talking about them. And I probably would steer away from talking about those events
100%.
Unless they ask.
But also it's like if you're speaking about the happy times, you know, just like have a feel of like what their reaction is.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like how they respond to you.
For sure.
So I don't know. I just think like when you're talking about exciting stuff, they're more on board with it. They want to, you know, converse and they want to, 100%. You know, share their experiences or speak about their memories with him. If you feel that they don't want to do any of that, then maybe like read the room, like maybe 100%. Then just step back a little bit. And I think slowly, they'll get there.
100%.
Like we weren't having these conversations laughing and carrying on at the beginning.
Definitely.
We're in tears, hugging one another at the beginning. Until it got to a point where it was like, we laugh now. We, you know, remember when he did this? Like just this morning, I was like, do you remember that song Dad was dancing to? It was, you know, Kiki, Do You Love Me?
Yes.
Like there's a whole video of him dancing to this song. And we're all just cracking up in the car, you know? So it will get to that point. You've just got to give it some time.
And every kid is at a different stage as well. But
100%.
Read the room. That's really important. And, you know, it just depends if they've been put through therapy as well. They might be a little bit more like ahead in terms of like with their emotions, maybe able to handle things a little bit better. So I think it's important, just to like gauge the conversation.
And every child is different.
That's
you know?
Every child, every age, it's all different, you know? Okay, so I have another question. What, if any, were some unexpected challenges that you faced in parenting without Mick? Many, I'm sure.
A lot.
I know, but that was a question that the people wanted to know.
I think more than anything now is just such a challenging age.
Okay.
Like my daughter's turning 15. You know, she's wearing makeup. She's like, you know, and it's, I just think, fuck, if you were here, like, you know, it's just, it can, look, my kids are really good. I'm not going to take that away from them. They are good kids, but sometimes they do, you know, push it a little bit.
Well, they're girls.
Yes.
Teenager.
Yeah. and they just don't fucking listen to me.
Standard.
Like, I feel like no matter how much I say something,
yeah,
like,
of course.
And it could be something like clean your room. Okay. And then nothing gets done. And I'm just continuously repeating it, repeat. Whereas, and this is just dumb. I'm just giving you a dumb example.
Course.
Whereas if he was here, it'd be like, fucking clean your room. Listen to what your mum said. Exactly. You know, it's just little things. It's little things. And I also think later.
Yes, definitely.
As they get older.
For sure.
You know, I think it would be extremely challenging.
Yeah, I agree.
And especially with girls.
Totally agree. When it comes to marriage and things like that, 100%.
That's
100%.
right.
100%.
And I think sometimes they do crave like a father figure.
Of course they would.
They've got like, you know, their cousins and their uncles, but when they like somebody, like a male, for example, like, you know, it could be my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
My eldest brother-in-law. My youngest will just latch.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, no, she will not
Yeah.
let go of.
Yeah.
If she likes this person,
Yeah.
forget about it.
Yeah.
I think they miss that. They miss having that father figure in their life.
Of course they would.
Yeah.
And I think a therapist would say that that's probably such expected behavior.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
I think when it comes to being a single parent and no access to the other parent at all, whether they've died or there's just no access at all anymore, it's very challenging to have to play both roles.
It is.
Very challenging.
Yeah.
A lot of things that you just don't think about.
You don't. And that's what I mean. Like later on in life, it's going to be a lot harder. I know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just like little things come up all the time.
Yeah.
And these are questions that you would ask your husband.
That's exactly right.
Advice you would get from your husband or something that your husband would just deal with naturally.
Just be like, what do I do in this situation?
That's exactly right. I had an instance with Hader just when I was on the way here, and I needed advice, but for like a male's perspective for Hader, but from an Islamic point of view. So I had to call my brother-in-law and just be like, this is my issue. Like I need advice, you know. And I mean, I don't mind. I'm close with all my brother-in-laws, so it's fine. We have a good relationship. But really, like, I want to ask my husband.
That's right.
Like, he's my person for anything,
That's
any
exactly
go-to,
right.
you know.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I mean, you know, I can ask my brother-in-laws anything, doesn't matter how, you know, whatever. They know the situation. Muhammad's not around, so I can always go to them. But, you know, you want to get your husband's point of view and your husband's opinions. And
definitely.
Yeah.
You know, and then the milestones are tough as well.
Absolutely.
They're like really, really hard.
Yeah.
They sting, you know,
100%.
just that little bit more
100%.
because they're not around for it.
And you know what? Like, I always think, birthdays, events, you know, whatever, for sure. But I always think about marriage, like when they get married. Like, that's like the one thing that people do their best to see with their kids, you know, even when people are a lot older, you know, say, for example, you're in your, I don't know, 40s, 50s, you haven't been married yet, you always hear the parents of those people like, all I want to do is see him or her get married. You know, it's like every parent's dream.
That's exactly right.
You know, I mean, it's beautiful to have your parents at your wedding, right? And meet your new life partner and then your kids. And there's so many, there's so much to look forward to in life. And it's like, sometimes it's disappointing that they don't get to see any of that stuff.
I'll give you another example. My eldest wanted to get a job.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, is it the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Is it like, what do you do in this? What would he have wanted, you know? Yeah. And then I just kept thinking, hang on a second. I worked when I was 14. Yeah. He worked when he was younger. I think he would probably tell me, you know what? Yeah. It's good for her to get a job and, you know, just to put herself out there, learn customer service. And And so I was like, okay.
But it's all decisions you have to make on your own.
That's right.
And just guess what they would
exactly what they would want.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much you prepare for someone to not be around, you're never going to ask every single question. Like you're never going to sit and say, hey, if something happens to you one day, would you want our daughter to work at 14 or 15
That's
or 16?
exactly right.
It's never going to happen.
Exactly right.
So there's always going to be. So parenting is hard.
But it's funny. My mother-in-law, she picked her up. She was dropping her off to work for the first time.
Yeah.
And then she got in the car and she's driving her to work. And then she's like, it's good that you're working, but you need to stay in school, yeah? Don't drop out. Like, you cannot leave school. Your dad wouldn't want you to leave school.
That's cute.
Yeah, she's stressing like, she's got a job. She's going to leave school.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then seeing her in her uniform for the first time, like I actually cried because I'm like, he's not here to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then like Celine starts high school next year. So
another big milestone.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Another question. Do you hear, not to you, but do you hear your kids talk about their dad to other people, family, school, teachers? Do you ever
get awkward.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I don't know why.
Well, I think it is awkward for them because a lot of people, like if they're meeting new friends at school, no one's going to assume they don't have a parent, so it would be awkward to say, and you know exactly what it's like. It makes the whole room awkward, right? If a kid at school says to you, what does your dad do for work? And you're like, oh, my dad's dead. Everyone's like,
Yes, I think awkward. Liana got asked that question at school.
Yeah.
And then Liana was like, oh, my dad owns Subways.
Oh, okay.
And then I think someone, like another student, said, oh, your dad has Subways. And she goes, no, he used to have Subways.
Yeah.
And then so she's telling me this, and I'm like, oh, did you tell them like your dad's not around, like he passed away? And she's like, no. Like they just don't tell people.
Yeah, just try and dodge that.
And Celine, like after it happened, that girl, she would not tell anybody that her dad was dead. I swear to you.
Really?
I swear. No, they don't.
Really interesting.
They don't need to know.
Okay. Yeah. Good on her.
Yeah, but why? Like, I'm just. I need to ask her that question.
Yeah, but good for her.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why she would.
She's funny.
Yeah, she's like, they don't need to know. Like, but what do you mean? Like,
she makes me laugh. Yeah, maybe that's just that's. Okay.
No, I'm not going to tell them that. They don't need to know.
Yeah.
Sorry? What do you mean?
That's so funny.
Someone asked you about your father. What are you saying? I was just chilling at home. Like.
Yeah, I guess they
that was right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Now she says, oh, my father passed away,
Yeah.
But they get awkward about it.
It is awkward though, I feel. It's awkward for kids. It's awkward for us sometimes.
I was just going to say that.
Imagine for a kid.
When someone asks you, are you married? And you're like, oh.
Yeah, that's right. Same thing
it's awkward for us as well, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Another question that I have for you is, how have you helped manage their grief, whether it's been therapy? I know you did speak in another episode about them going to therapy really early on, maybe 1 or 2 sessions, I think I remember. But have they continued therapy? Have they gone back? What have you, how do you help
so they did go to therapy. They did a couple of sessions. We were in lockdown at the time, so
how did that come about? You thought it was the right thing? School thought it was the right thing? How'd that happen?
School reached out to me.
Right.
And said, we have a therapist that can assist with, their grief.
Yeah.
Would you be interested? And I said yes.
Yeah.
I would be very interested, right? Like if it's going to help them
100%
with their grief, then of course I'm on board.
Yeah.
They did a couple of sessions. It was over Zoom because, it was during lockdown. So I just give them the iPad and I'd walk away because I didn't want them to feel awkward.
Yeah.
speaking about how they felt in front of me.
That's right.
So I'd give them the iPad and I'd just walk away. Then that kind of stopped.
Okay.
And my youngest wouldn't really talk about it.
Right.
So again, going back to the other question, I would sit down with her and I'd try and speak to her about it, and she just didn't want to talk about it.
Okay.
And so I knew that was my cue to just
drop it. Yeah.
Right? To the point where like you'd be showing her photos. If a photo came up of her dad, she'd just like launch it.
Okay.
Like next.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, why'd you do that? It's just too sad. I don't want to talk about it. My eldest, she would speak to me a lot about it.
Yeah.
And she was more open with her feelings and how she felt.
Yeah.
My youngest just
two different personalities, right?
Put a lid on it. Yeah. Didn't want to know about it.
Yeah.
And then in time, I allowed her. So when she would speak about him, I just let her. Like, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, you're speaking about dad now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just go with it, you know? Really, whatever they need and whatever they want. If they want to talk about him, I'm going to talk about him. If they don't want to talk about him, I'm not going to talk about him. You have your own grief, but then you also have to worry about them and how they're grieving.
And
you know what I mean?
Number one, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. So, just be mindful about how they're feeling. So I think that for them, if I knew that they needed more therapy, I would have definitely put them.
Have they asked you to go back? No. Okay, fair.
No, I think at one point they didn't. They wanted to stop.
Stop
going.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, maybe it's a bit early for them.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
But like it, it doesn't end.
Of course.
Especially with children.
Of course.
They'll have their moments where they'll just cry, and you just have to be there to support them and tell them that he's looking down on them and he's so proud of them. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard.
My question, which you've semi-answered throughout, but we have a lot of widows that follow us that have children. Lots of them have children.
Yeah.
If they're sort of old enough, like your children, to sort of comprehend, sort of understand, not really like my son was, but your children's age and above, what would you say to them as mothers? Like what, because you find yourself in a position where your whole world is falling apart. Your life is like shambles. Like
That's right.
You can't even pick yourself up, but you have to, right? So it's like, I feel for a lot of these women because they reach out and they're so early on in their grief. They'll be like, oh, my husband passed away 3 weeks ago. My husband passed away 2 months ago. And I know where they're at head-wise. I know how fucked it is. And I know, like, thinking, I can't get through this. Like, what the fuck am I going to do?
Yeah.
I can't even look after myself, and I've got these kids that I have to look after mentally, and my mental health is fucked. What do they do?
I think I can only speak for myself.
Yeah.
And I know that you experience similar. When you have children, you have no choice but to keep going, right? Have no choice but to, continue to create a somewhat normal environment for the kids.
For sure.
So I know for us, we were in lockdown. So there was 4 months of us just grieving together as a family.
Yeah.
I think it becomes challenging when you don't have children, right? Because then your grief is just it's there, right? It's like very much there. But when you have kids, they become your priority.
Yeah.
So you try to continue to create this happy environment for them, and do things that they want to do. Do things that make them happy. And I know there's a lot of people in our comments that have said, I'm not even thinking about myself. I'm just trying to, make sure my kid is happy. And I think instinctively that's what you go with when you have children.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean?
Definitely. And I think normality and routine is
exactly
really important for children.
It is very important.
Even if it's not benefiting you.
100%.
And even if you just want to rot in your bed, you really can't when you have
you
kids.
Can't. We came out of lockdown. They were back at school. I was back at work. They were back at school. I was back at work. Like, you know, even after school activities, like it just needed to go back to normal. Yeah. Right?
Of course.
Because what are you going to do?
Well, I think
live in this
really,
funk?
and I think you really suffer ultimately if you
don't. But your kids suffer as well.
Yeah, I think everyone suffers because the world still continues. Everyone's still continuing after.
You can do your life and carry your grief at the same time.
Of course, yeah.
We did it. Like,
absolutely.
You know,
100%.
I just think that when you have children, they become the priority.
Yeah.
And you don't have time to think about what you're going through or how you're going to.
Of course not.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think, though, it's also important because we don't have time for ourselves and to whatever. I think eventually to get yourself to some sort of therapy is beneficial when you're ready. You have to. You know? Yeah.
And I did that. Yeah. Like, I would do that one session a week or a fortnight, whatever it was. And then when I'd come home, I'm like present.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I remember at the time Lana actually said to me, she was like, Nadine, like, you need to take one day off work because I was working around the clock.
Yeah.
You need to take one day off work to just focus on yourself.
Yeah.
No kids. Yeah. No work.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
You also need to think about yourself. Yeah. And it's true.
Yeah.
You do need to think about yourself.
100%.
But at the same time, think about yourself and then
go back into mum mode. Kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't, unfortunately, you can't extend that too long thinking about yourself.
You can't.
Fill your cup a little bit enough to where you can perform well as a mother.
Exactly.
I think that's the most important thing.
That's exactly right.
And then after that, unfortunately, like, not really unfortunately, but you're second to your children. That's what we sign up to as mums.
That's exactly right.
We always put ourselves last when it comes to our kids, but I think that's what being a good mum is all about. But I just think when you're ready and you have that time and you have that breathing space and maybe your children are doing a little better, that's when you can go back and look after yourself a little bit more.
Yeah, 100%. And, like you said earlier, routine, structure.
Very important.
Grieve. At the beginning, do what you need to do as a family. Do what you have to do.
We're not talking about the early days. Just go back to routine. No, of course not.
No.
Yeah.
Give yourself the time that you need.
100%. Yeah.
And then after that.
Yeah. But the reality is, as much as you'd like to, you can't take years off to grieve.
No, you can't.
And sit in that. You can't. You will grieve forever, 100%, but not the same way that you're grieving in those first 3 months.
That's
exactly
right.
You have to eventually get back to life.
Yeah.
Otherwise, life just will get it ahead of you and you'll fall behind. And you may not recover from that. And you can't afford to do that when you have children.
No.
And now you're a sole parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that in itself is obviously
massive, huge,
tough.
Huge responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that was a big episode.
I can probably keep going, to be honest.
I know. Yeah. You can. There's so much to uncover, especially when it comes to children.
Yeah.
And how they grieve. I see so many little reels of kids talking about like their grief with their parents and how they felt. Kids are amazing, Like until you actually not look at them as a kid for 5 minutes and ask them those really deep questions, I feel like their responses are shocking. Like you think, how the fuck did that come out of a 7-year-old's mouth?
Exactly.
How do you know that?
That's exactly
you
right.
have more wisdom than an adult.
Yeah.
They're amazing. Kids
they
are
amazing.
So, yeah. And, like if you knew Nadine's kids, she's got 2 really good kids. So you've done a good job, babe.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're the best. They're so respectful. They're so polite. They're just such good girls. So I think Mick would be happy with everything that you're doing.
I think he would be too.
Of course he would be.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Thanks so much for joining in, guys. If you could hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, that would mean the world to us, so we can keep creating these videos for you. As always, Married Now, Widowed on all platforms. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram. We have a Facebook page as well. So if you are grieving or you're a support person for someone that's grieving, please check out our Facebook group at Married Now, Widowed. It's a super safe, friendly community where we just share pretty much everything and anything about grief. And we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.